Welcome to Point of Sale Session 2. I'm going to pick up where I left off from Session 1 by going into Point of Sale. Remember, I can click on the button, I can hit my A key on my keyboard, or I can press my Enter key on my keyboard to enter any of these selections. Number 1, enter invoices. I click on that. Few more pieces of information about this screen. So first, in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, and actually in the bottom in the center, you're going to see your task number. That's the identifier for this particular icon or this particular task. You'll notice that when I am looking at my main menu, at my desktop, you'll also notice the task number displayed under your icon. When SBC asks you for your task number, that's the information that they're asking you for. So if I have multi-stores, then I'm going to have my store number display in the upper left-hand corner. That store number is dictated by the information that's set up in background screens of the system that are applied for my particular task. So in a background screen somewhere in SBC, it says that my task number 20 is defaulted to store number 1. Other information in that table dictates which printer that I'm going to, things like that. There are 2 ways to change your store number. The first is if you press the up arrow. On the right-hand side, you see a button that says F9 Invoice Parameters. Now, you may not see this button because security may have locked you out of being able to adjust these pieces of information. But if you have this button, you can click on that, go to your store number, overlay with an appropriate store number, hit the Enter key, and then hit the Enter key one more time, and it's going to change your store number in the upper left corner of your screen. The second thing that might change your store number is whether this information comes from your customer's account record. We have some customers who have a call center going on in their business, so you make a telephone call to a main office, wherever that office may be. And as the user enters the customer information into the screen, the store number is going to flip to that customer's default warehouse. So you've got warehouses all over the city or all over the country. The store number is going to reflect where this customer buys from. Once the ticket is finalized, the invoice is going to print to a printer at that warehouse or that location, and the customer is either going to come to that location to pick up the materials, or those materials are going to be delivered to their home or business. So that's the other reason that your store number might change. I'm going to get out of Point of Sale and go back in, default my store number back to my number 1. The second thing that you'll see is transaction code. If I press my up arrow key, over on the right here, I have a transaction code help button. If I click on that, it's going to show me valid transaction codes that I have in my system. So for this particular system that you see right here, I have invoice, that's a regular sale, a credit memo, that's a regular return. I can do quotes, I can do core exchanges, core returns, defective returns, and payments. These are the transaction codes that I can use in Point of Sale. There are other options that we have that you'll see in different videos when we're talking about vendor returns and things like that, but for the time being, these are the only ones that are available. And if I look on my screen and I go up to that button and click on it, these are going to show me the valid transaction codes that I can use in Point of Sale, period. If there's another type of transaction code that you might need to use, such as a buyout or a buyout return, you're going to want to talk to your system administrator about getting that added into the system. While I'm here, I've got some valid function buttons down at the bottom, such as if I change the transaction code to an H, I can retrieve some hold tickets. If I change it to an S, I can retrieve special orders. So you can do a lot from that transaction code field in the upper left corner of your screen. I'm going to click on I for invoice to continue. And if you'll notice, when I hit that up arrow, there was a question mark that showed up in the transaction code help, and there was an F9 that showed up in my invoice parameters. To access things in SBC, there's really 3 ways that we do it. We use the function keys at the top of your keyboard, F1 through F12. We use the control key, so Control C is how I add a comment, Control R is how I do a price override. And the third is a shift question mark, or the shift key. So in this case, if I hold down my shift key and hit the question mark, it's going to take me to my transaction code help. You should have received, or you should receive, a cheat sheet that gives you kind of a rundown of the most used keystrokes. There are keystrokes that are in help screens throughout the system as well if you want to get to know some of those key shortcuts, or if you want to use them for a specific purpose. I'm going to press the enter key, and that's going to get me off of my transaction code. Like I said before, if I want to enter my clerk code, I need to get that from my system administrator, and then my customer number, I can simply type in the number. If I have multiple ship-tos, I can F1 and F2 through these multiple ship-tos. If I want to see the list, I hit the F7 key, and that gives me that list there. Anytime a window pops up like the one that you're seeing, the buttons at the bottom are going to give you instructions as to which direction that you can move, or what your options are when you see this information. So I can either enter a line number selection, and so that would be one of my letters on the far left-hand side, or I can click on one of them, or I can press my home key to simply get out of this search. So I'm going to click on the E key, and that's going to list my E ship to address. Okay, today I'm going to talk about the buttons on the right-hand side. I am not going to talk about cataloging right now. I'll get to that a little bit later. So the first key down after catalogs is file linking. File linking gives me the opportunity from point of sale to access other places in my system. So if I click on that button, I can get to my inventory file. Now if I go to inventory and I don't have a part selected, it's simply going to allow me to enter a part number at that screen. I can get to my customer backorder file to see what parts this customer is back ordering. I can look at part tracking by account, which I will explain in just a second, or I can get to a list of recently finalized ticket reprints. So part tracking by account is a menu that allows me to see sales by item for this particular customer. So if I go down to letter C and I press the enter key, it's going to first ask me if I have a specific part that I want to look up. If I do, I enter it here with the manufacturer code. If I don't, I simply press the enter key. And those asterisks there are saying that those are wildcards, so it's going to search for all of my parts. This is going to give me a listing of all of the transactions by part for this particular account. You'll notice the account number on the left, the part number is next, or the remark field, the unit cell, the invoice number, the invoice date, the quantity of pieces that were shipped, a job number if I need one, the cost on the far right, and the transaction code. Now again, your screen may look slightly different than mine because these are customized screens. Perhaps you don't have cost listed here, but this is an opportunity for you to see what this customer's purchased and what you've sold them for, if perhaps they come in and argue a particular sell price, or they need to look up information from previous sales. At the bottom, I can F1 and F2 to scroll through my list here. I can get to the very last page, which in this case I'm going backwards by invoice date, so that would take me to their oldest sales. I could F9 to select one of the tickets. I click the F9 key, go to the invoice I want to see, and there's a Control X archive button. If I click on that, it's going to pop up that invoice for me. This is the invoice that we used in the point of sale session number 1 instructions. I can email it to whoever I need to email it to, or I can print it to paper. I can also just use it for reference and then hit the escape key to go back to part tracking by account. I'm going to press the home key at the bottom to get off of this, and it takes me back to that previous menu. I can go to the help if I need to, or I can press the escape key and that'll kick me back out. So I'm back at my ticket. Now if I were to enter a part number on my line, and since my cursor is still on that part number, I'm going to click on the file linking button again, and I have a couple more options. If I go to inventory, it's going to give me this part's inventory record, so I didn't have to search for it. My customer backorder file is available. Part tracking is going to do the same thing. It's going to take me right to part tracking for this particular part only. My current orders are going to be any of my purchase orders that I have for this part. This is very nice because if I have a customer in front of me, they're asking for a part that I don't have, I have the opportunity to go into the current orders and see if perhaps they're just waiting on the dock to be received, or they're supposed to show up this afternoon, so that I can give that customer that information and try to save from losing that sale. E-Buyer's Guide is my next selection. Recently finalized ticket reprint, and then finally part tracking by part. Part tracking by part and part tracking by account are basically the same thing. Their screens look exactly the same. The only difference is part tracking by account is looking at this account's history. Part tracking by part is looking at this part's history regardless of the account. If I have a customer who says that they got a special price on a part and I can't find the ticket under their account number, perhaps it was put in as a cash invoice, or maybe it was put under the wrong accounts information, I can search for that by that part tracking by part instead of having to get out of point of sale and not knowing which direction to use to look for that information. I'm going to click on the Escape No Linking button. I could also hit my Escape key on my keyboard, and that's going to pop me back to point of sale. Part tracking. That second button is my part tracking by account button. It is so popular that we put it under the file linking just in case you've already clicked on file linking, or we have the button available out here. It takes you to the same place, that report, and displays for you any sales. In this case, for that Wix 51515 part, because my cursor is sitting on it. Otherwise, it'll give me my part tracking by account information for this entire account. I'm going to press my Enter key to get off of the ordered. F7 Search for Part is the next button down, and this gives me the opportunity to set up searches by something other than the part number. So if I want to search for a part within a manufacturer code, this is extremely helpful for a manufacturer code that might be a number. We have a couple customers who have a manufacturer line of 101, 105. Those are also the beginnings to multiple part numbers in multiple different lines. So if I wanted to search for part numbers within my manufacturer code 101, I could come down here and choose this line and put in a 101, and then it's going to ignore the part number and show me that manufacturer code's listing. It allows me to cut out a lot of information when I'm searching for things, and if you have a system that has 1 million, 2 million parts in the inventory, anything that we can do to filter search information if you can't find the part just off the top, it makes life a lot easier for you. Number 2, search for part by description. If I click on this and I type in the word filter, it's going to search for any parts where the description is the word filter. A nice button over here that helps with this is this hide quote quantity on hand that's less than 0. If I click on that button, then it's going to recalculate the list and only give me those parts where quantity on hand is greater than 0. Very helpful. I can choose one of these by either typing in the letter or clicking on the line, or I can press the home key to end my search. The interchange has to do with cataloging, so I'll leave that for the catalog video. F6 to delete a line allows me to delete a line off the screen. So if I click the F6 key, it's going to ask me the line number to delete. On the left, my line numbers show up. I'm going to type in 1, press my Enter key, and that deleted my line. Real quickly, if I add a line of information and then perhaps a comment, oops. If I go to hit that F6 delete line and I delete that line of information, it asks me whether I want to delete the associated information. Perhaps I wrote a long paragraph of information about this part and then the customer came back and said that they didn't want it, but I want to leave the information about the part on the screen. I can do that by choosing yes or no appropriately here. If I say no, it's going to leave that comment up on the screen for me. I'm going to add a part back to my screen. Okay. The next, I'm going to skip the next button for just a second. The F8 cancel ticket button is the one that I click if I want to cancel an invoice. Easy as that. When I click on F8 or I click on cancel ticket, and I can do that at any time during the invoice, yes to cancel will kick this ticket out and throw me back into the beginning of point of sale. Now there are a couple times where you may be asked what your reason is to cancel the ticket or for a password, and that would be if this ticket has already been put on hold at some point, so it already has a reference number. There is security that can be added to the system that asks you why you did it, makes the manager enter their code or their password to verify that cancellation, just so tickets that have already been put on hold aren't canceled by accident. I'm going to say no to cancel this. Okay, Home to Tender is the button that we used in the last session. That's how I get to my payment screens, so I'm going to skip that one for now. And my Help button down here has a bunch of different help keystrokes that may work for you. Remember I said that the functions that we use are using the control key with a character, using the function keys at the top of the screen, or using the shift button. My suggestion is that once you get onto point of sale and you get familiar with it, come back into these help screens, take a look at them, and see if any of the line items may make your life a little bit easier. To go over these and teach you how to use each of these is just going to be a little bit overwhelming. So we tend to teach you only those that are really necessary, how to do a price override, how to enter a remark. But a lot of these function keys in the background can help you out with what you're doing during the day. So as I said, once you feel comfortable with point of sale, click on the Help button and review the list and see if some of these wouldn't work for you. The last button I'm going to show you is the F10 Ticket Status button. When I click on the F10 Ticket Status button, it gives me the option to put a ticket on hold, pick, or quote. Now a quote is typically just paper, and the reason I say typically is that each of these choices can be customized, so there can be situations where a quote perhaps might affect your inventory, but for 90% of our customers, a quote is a piece of paper with some pricing on it. It doesn't affect the account, it doesn't affect your inventory. You can choose whether or not you want to have them print. And we can also have them be void or deleted after a certain number of days or weeks with the assumption that that's a quote. You don't want a customer to bring a quote in a year later and think that those prices will still be valid. So if you save this as a quote, you'll run through the screens appropriately, and then your system administrator would determine whether or not those quotes get deleted after a certain number of days. A hold and a pick typically affect your inventory, so they pull material out of your quantity on hand and they update a quantity committed field. They also affect your customer's credit limit balance, so their credit limit balance will be deducted while those items are on hold. The difference between hold and pick, number one, is what the document looks like when it's printed. So you can have your system set up to print to a different printer or on a different colored sheet of paper or something like that for holds and picks. So you can determine the difference between a hold or a pick and then a finalized invoice. The real difference between hold and pick has to do with multi-store configurations. A hold is, I've created a ticket, it took me a half an hour, I'm going to put it on hold and I'm going to go to lunch because I don't want to lose all of my information on my screen. So you click the hold button, it affects your inventory, but that's it. And then you come back at a later time and you pull your ticket back up and you finalize it or add more to it. The pick button allows you to actually start picking materials off of the shelf. This is especially important if you have a multi-store situation and you're transferring materials back and forth. If I put an account on or a ticket on hold, my other store doesn't know that I have material that I want to transfer over. If I put the ticket as a pick, the other store will receive an order for the items that I'd like to transfer from that location to me, will pick those items and send them over to me with the understanding that this sale is moving forward. I simply need to get the materials from the other location and then I'll be able to give them to the customer. So that's the difference between the hold and the pick, and we'll talk more about that when we do transfers. No change is how I get off of these selections, so I'm going to click on the no change. And I'm going to click on the Home to Tender button because the button, the second from the left, the F10 for hold, loan, pick, quote, or special order, is basically the same button. If I click on that, it gives me the option for hold, pick, and quote again. Loan is used just very occasionally. You may or may not have that button on your screen. A loan is if you loan large materials or large equipment to your customers with the anticipation of getting them back at some point. And then special order is the ability for you to take a deposit on an item or to create a purchase order straight from point of sale. So we'll go over how special orders work at a later time. But you have that same button there if you happen to hit the home key and get down to the bottom of the screen. I'm going to click on the No Change button to get back to the main screen here. If you have any questions at this time, please call SBC at 800-829-4722 or send us an email at sbctraining@autolog.com. Thank you so much, and I'll see you for session number 3.